still remember the exact way the light hit that bench. Not the first time I saw it, but the last, before everything changed without really changing at all. It was late summer, and the sun hung low, spilling gold across the platform like honey someone had forgotten to wipe up. The air smelled faintly of diesel and something sweeter. Maybe the lavender from the flower kiosk. Maybe just the warmth of old wood breathing after a long day. For 10 years, I'd watched this place blur past my train window every Thursday. Just a flicker, a breath. Long enough to see the clock tower, its hands always 5 minutes behind, as if it couldn't bear to rush anyone out. Long enough to catch the silhouette of the wooden benches, those long, scarred slats of pine, worn smooth by generations of waiting bodies. I never got off, never even thought about it. It was just part of the rhythm: home, work, train, repeat. The station was a comma in my week, not a sentence. But that Thursday, the one that became everything, I didn't look away. I don't know what made me pull the emergency cord. Not really. It wasn't dramatic. No sudden epiphany. Just a quiet pressure in my chest, like a stone I'd carried so long I'd forgotten its weight, until that morning, when it shifted. Maybe it was the way the conductor said, "Next stop," with such tired kindness. Maybe it was the empty seat beside me, where I'd imagined her sitting for a decade. Or maybe it was just time. The train sighed to a halt. Doors hissed open, and I stepped onto the platform like I belonged there, even though I hadn't set foot on it since I was 23 and full of plans that didn't include staying. My shoes echoed too loudly. My bag felt too heavy. Everything seemed both familiar and strange. The same cracked tile near the ticket booth, the same faded poster for a festival that happened years ago, the same slow drip from the awning after a morning shower. But the air was different, softer, like the place had exhaled while I was gone. And then I saw her, not right away. At first, she was just a shape behind the flower kiosk, a small glass stall tucked beside the newsstand, overflowing with blooms. Sunflowers, mostly, bright faces turned toward the light. She was arranging them, her back to me, sleeves rolled to her elbows, silver threading through her dark hair like moonlight caught in a net. Her movements were calm, certain, nothing like the frantic energy I remembered. I stood there, frozen between the urge to run and the deeper pull to stay. My heart didn't race. It just paused, like it was holding its breath, waiting to see if this was real or just another ghost I'd conjured on a lonely commute. She turned then, not because I made a sound, not because I moved, just turned, and looked right at me. No soak, no gasp, just a slow blink, like she'd been expecting me all along. Then, without a word, she reached for a single sunflower, tall, proud, petals slightly ruffled, and held it out across the counter. I walked over. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else. "You're late," she said, not unkindly, just factually, like the clock on the tower, stating the obvious with gentle indifference. I took the flower. The stem was cool, rough with tiny hairs. "The train runs on its own schedule," I said, voice quieter than I meant it to be. She smiled then, small, real. "So do we." We didn't talk about why I left, didn't ask where I'd been, didn't mention the letter I never sent, or the phone call I never made, or the 100 times I almost turned back. Instead, she poured 2 glasses of lemonade from a pitcher, sweating in the afternoon heat, and gestured to the bench, the one closest to the tracks, the one with our initials carved into the underside, hidden from view. We sat. The train I just left pulled away, its whistle a soft moan against the sky. Another would come in 20 minutes, and another after that. Time here didn't feel linear. It felt circular, patient. I realized, watching her peel an orange with careful fingers, that I'd spent 10 years carrying a story about this place. And her, that might not have been true at all. I'd assumed she'd left, moved on, forgotten, built a life somewhere brighter, faster, better. But she'd stayed, not waiting exactly, just being, tending beauty in a world that often forgets to look down. The sun dipped lower. Shadows stretched long across the platform. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to be anywhere else. I still don't know what I'll do when the next train comes. But for now, the bench is warm beneath me. The lemonade is tart and sweet. And the woman beside me hums a tune I almost remember. I think I'll stay a little longer. The orange peel came off in one long spiral. She laid it on the bench between us like a question mark neither of us was ready to answer. Juice beaded on her fingertips, catching the light. I watched her wipe them on her apron. A faded denim thing with sunflowers stitched crookedly near the pocket. And I remembered how she used to hate getting her hands dirty. Back then, ink stains were the worst offense. Now, soil lived under her nails like it belonged there. It's quieter than I remember, I said, just to fill the space. My voice sounded too loud against the hum of the station, the distant clatter of a luggage cart, the soft chime of an arriving train 3 platforms over. She tilted her head, considering. It's not quieter. You're just listening differently. I didn't argue. She was right. Before, I'd only ever heard this place through the glass of a moving train. Muffled, distant, like someone else's life playing out behind a screen. Now, standing inside it, I could hear the creak of the bench beneath us, the whisper of pedals brushing against glass in her kiosk, the slow tick of that stubborn clock overhead, still 5 minutes behind the world. A young couple walked past, arguing in hushed tones. He carried 2 overstuffed backpacks. She clutched a crumpled ticket in one hand and wiped her eyes with the other. They stopped near the edge of the platform, backs turned, voices low but sharp with urgency. I watched them, and for a second, I saw us, younger, tighter wound, convinced every silence meant something was breaking. We used to do that, I said softly. She followed my gaze. We did. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd stayed calm? If we just sat down like this instead of shouting? She peeled a segment from the orange and handed it to me. I used to, every day for about a year. She paused, popped another segment into her mouth. Then I realized wondering doesn't change the past. It just steals peace from the present. Her words settled over me like a blanket. Not heavy, just there, warm. I looked around. The flower kiosk wasn't fancy, just a small glass stall with wooden trim, shelves lined with mason jars holding everything from daisies to deep red dahlias. A chalkboard sign read, "Take what you need, leave what you can. No prices, no pressure, just flowers and trust." How long have you been here? I asked. 6 years, she said. After I retired from teaching, the station manager let me turn the old newsstand into this. She gestured to the blooms. I figured people carry enough hard things home. Maybe they'd like to carry something beautiful, too. I thought about all the Thursdays I'd passed by, never knowing she was here, never imagining this quiet life blooming in the place where ours had unraveled. The sky softened further, shifting from gold to amber, then to a pale rose. Twilight was coming, the gentle fade between day and night when everything feels suspended possible. Shadows stretched longer, merging at our feet. The air cooled just enough to raise goosebumps on my arms. She stood, brushed orange crumbs from her apron, and walked back to the kiosk. I watched her move sure, unhurried. She opened a drawer beneath the counter and pulled out a small notebook, its cover worn soft at the edges. She brought it back and handed it to me. Inside, page after page of delicate pencil sketches. Floral arrangements dated every single day for years. Sunflowers with lavender, peonies with eucalyptus, wild daisies tied with twine. Some days had notes beside them. For the woman who cried on platform 3. For the boy's first train ride. For no reason at all. I traced a sketch from last Thursday. Exactly the kind of bouquet I might have bought if I'd gotten off the train then. My throat tightened. "I didn't think you'd ever come back," she said quietly, not looking at me. "Not really, but I kept drawing anyway." I closed the notebook gently, handed it back. "I didn't think you'd still be here." She took it, fingers brushing mine for just a second. "I'm not here because I was waiting for you," she said, meeting my eyes now. "I'm here because this place, it fits me, like a favorite sweater." I believed her, and somehow that made it easier to breathe. The next train announcement crackled over the speakers. Soft, distorted, almost dreamlike. My train. The one that would take me back to my routine, my apartment, my life that didn't include sunflowers or slow peeling of oranges on wooden benches. I stood. So did she. We didn't hug. Didn't promise to meet again. Didn't even say goodbye. Instead, she reached into her kiosk and pulled out a single daisy, small, white, unassuming. She tucked it behind my ear, her fingers lingering just a moment longer than necessary. Next time, she said, try not to be 10 years late. I smiled. No promises. And as I walked toward the platform, I didn't look back, but I felt her watching, felt the daisy tremble slightly with each step, felt the weight of that old hurt shift. Not gone, but lighter, like a ticket finally folded and placed in my pocket, not clutched in my fist. The train doors opened. I stepped inside. This time, when the station blurred past the window, I didn't look away. I watched until the flower kiosk disappeared into the twilight, carrying with me the quiet certainty that some places don't abandon you. They just wait, patiently, for you to remember how to come home. I didn't sleep that night. Not because my mind was racing, no, it was too calm for that. It was the kind of wakefulness that feels like floating, like lying in a boat on still water, watching stars blink awake one by one. The daisy she'd tucked behind my ear sat on my nightstand, its petals already curling at the edges, but I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. It wasn't just a flower. It was proof. Proof that some things don't vanish when you walk away. They settle, root, wait. For days afterward, I caught myself glancing at train schedules I hadn't looked at in years. Not obsessively, just noticing. The 6:15 still ran every Thursday. The station name still appeared in small print beneath next stop. And every time I passed a flower shop, I slowed down, half expecting to see sunflowers arranged just so, with a chalkboard sign that said take what you need. But life pulled me back into its rhythm. Emails piled up. Meetings filled my calendar. Rain came and went. And still, that Thursday kept circling in my thoughts like a quiet tide. I told myself I wouldn't go back. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Because what if it had been a fluke? A moment suspended in golden light that couldn't survive daylight? What if the next time, the silence between us felt heavy instead of soft? What if I ruined what little peace we'd found by wanting more than was offered? That's the thing about second chances, they don't announce themselves with fanfare. They whisper, and sometimes you're too afraid to answer. Still, 2 weeks later, I found myself standing on the platform again. Not on a Thursday, on a Tuesday, early afternoon. The station was quieter then. Fewer commuters, more travelers with nowhere urgent to be. The clock still read 5 minutes slow. The benches still bore the same scars. And there she was, behind the kiosk, trimming stems with a pair of silver scissors that caught the light like old memories. She saw me before I reached her, didn't look surprised, just nodded once, like I was right on time. You brought rain, she said, glancing at the damp shoulders of my coat. It followed me, I replied. She smiled faintly and handed me a sprig of rosemary. For clarity, she said, and because it smells like home. I took it, rubbed the leaves between my fingers. The scent rose sharp and green, familiar in a way I couldn't place. Maybe from childhood kitchens, maybe from somewhere deeper. We sat on the bench again. No oranges this time. No lomenade. Just the sound of distant trains and the soft rustle of petals in their jars. A breeze moved through the platform, carrying the scent of wet pavement and something floral. Maybe jasmine, maybe hope. I thought about what you said. I told her after a while. About wondering, stealing peace. She tilted her head, waiting. I realized I've been wondering about you for 10 years. Not just whether you were okay, but whether I mattered to you at all. Whether you ever looked at that bench and remembered. She was quiet for a long moment. Long enough that I worried I'd crossed a line. But then she said, softly, I didn't remember the bench. I remembered your laugh. The way it got stuck in your throat when you were trying not to cry. The way you always tucked your hair behind your left ear when you were nervous. I hadn't known she noticed those things. I stayed away because I thought you'd moved on, I admitted. Because I thought showing up would be selfish. Like I was asking for something you didn't owe me. She turned to face me fully now. Her eyes were the color of late afternoon tea, warm, deep, with flecks of gold near the center. Coming back isn't selfish, she said. It's brave. Especially when you're not sure you'll be welcome. I swallowed. Are I? Always, she said, without hesitation. Then, almost as an afterthought. But not because of who you were. Because of who you are now. Quieter. Kinder to yourself. That's who I see. I didn't know what to say to that. So I just sat with it. Let it settle into my bones like sunlight. A child ran past, chasing a red balloon that had slipped from their grip. It snagged on the awning above the kiosk, bobbing gently in the wind. She stood, fetched a step stool from behind the counter, and carefully untangled it. Handed it back to the wide-eyed boy, who mumbled a thank you and dashed off toward his mother. When she sat again, she said, "You don't have to explain why you left, or why you came back. Some stories don't need endings. They just need witnesses." I looked at her, really looked, at the lines around her eyes, the calm in her hands, the way she held space without filling it. This wasn't the woman I'd loved and lost. This was someone new, someone who'd grown while I was gone. And maybe I had too. The next train arrived. Not mine, not yet, but its arrival stirred the air, sent petals trembling in their jars. "I should go," I said, though I didn't move. She nodded. "You will, when you're ready." I stood slowly, brushed invisible dust from my coat. Then, on impulse, I plucked a single daisy from the small bouquet she kept on the counter, just a few white blooms tied with twine, and placed it on the bench where we'd been sitting. "For next time," I said. She didn't say anything, just watched me walk away, her hands resting lightly on the edge of the kiosk, steady as the clock that refused to keep proper time. This time, when I boarded the train, I didn't wait for the station to disappear before closing my eyes. I carried it with me. The scent of rosemary, the weight of her words, the quiet certainty that some returns aren't about fixing the past. They're about making peace with it. And maybe, just maybe, leaving a little beauty behind for the next version of yourself to find. Autumn came softly that year, not with a crash of color, but with a slow exhale. Leaves turning at the edges, mornings wrapped in mist, the kind of cool that makes you pull your sleeves over your hands without thinking. I kept going back to the station, not every week, not on any schedule, just when I needed to. Sometimes she was there, sometimes she wasn't. The kiosk always was, flowers arranged with quiet intention, the chalkboard sign unchanged. Take what you need, leave what you can, and always, a small vase of daisies on the counter. Never labeled, never explained, but I knew. I never asked who they were for. I didn't have to. One afternoon in early October, I arrived just as rain began to fall, light, silver drops that turned the platform into a mirror. She was closing up the kiosk, pulling a tarp over the more delicate blooms. Her hair was damp, curling slightly at the ends. She saw me and paused, one hand still on the tarp, the other holding a thermos. "You're getting wet," she said. "So are you," I replied. She smiled, just a little, and uncapped the thermos. Chamomile, with honey. We sat under the awning, shoulders almost touching, watching the rain blur the tracks into soft gray lines. Steam rose from our cups, mingling with the cool air. No one else was around, just us, the hiss of tires on wet pavement far beyond the station, and the steady patter of rain on metal. "I used to hate rain," I said after a while. "Back then, it always felt like the sky was mourning something." She blew gently on her tea. "And now it feels like the world is washing itself clean." I looked at her. "Maybe we all need that sometimes." She nodded slowly. "I planted lavender this spring, right behind the kiosk. It's doing well. Smells strongest after rain." I imagined it, purple spikes glistening, releasing their calm into the air. A small act of faith in beauty, repeated daily. We fell into silence again, but it wasn't empty. It was full of everything we weren't saying. The years between us, the choices we'd made, the ways we changed. And maybe that was enough. Maybe some silences aren't gaps to fill, but spaces to rest in. After a while, she reached into her coat pocket and handed me a small envelope. Plain white. No name. No stamp. What's this? I asked. A page, she said. From the notebook. I thought you might want it. I opened it carefully. Inside was a pressed daisy, perfectly preserved, and beneath it, a sketch. Just two figures on a bench, backs to the viewer, facing the tracks. Above them, in neat script, October 3rd, 2026. They came back. My breath caught, not because it was grand, but because it was true. I had come back, not to fix anything, not to rewrite the past, just to be here, to see her, to let this place hold me again. I don't deserve this, I whispered. You don't have to deserve it, she said gently. You just have to accept it. That hit me harder than I expected. All my life, I tied worth to action, to earning love, to proving I changed, to making up for lost time. But here, in this rain-soaked corner of a forgotten station, she was offering something simpler. Presence. No conditions. No performance. The rain slowed to a drizzle. Sunlight broke through the clouds in thin, golden threads, catching the droplets on the awning like tiny prisms. I've been thinking, I said, voice low, about how we used to talk about leaving this town. How we'd say, when we get out, we'll never look back. Like this place was something to escape. She tilted her head. And now I wonder if we were running from the wrong thing. I looked at her. Maybe we weren't trapped by the station. Maybe we were just scared of staying still long enough to see what it could become. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I stayed because I stopped running. Not because I gave up, but because I finally listened. This place had something to say. It just took me years to hear it. I thought about that, about how I'd spent a decade moving, changing jobs, cities, routines, always chasing a version of peace that felt just out of reach. And all the while, the thing I needed most wasn't ahead of me. It was behind me, waiting. The next train announcement echoed softly over the platform. My stop wasn't for another hour, but I stood anyway. She didn't ask me to stay, didn't try to fill the space I'd leave. She just handed me a sprig of lavender from her pocket, fresh, fragrant, still damp from the rain. For your coat, she said. So you remember the smell of coming home. I tucked it into my breast pocket, right over my heart. Walking back to the train, I didn't look back, but I didn't need to. I carried the station with me now, not as a wound, but as a compass. A reminder that sometimes, the bravest thing you can do isn't to leave, but to return. Not to who you were, but to who you're becoming. And maybe, just maybe, to leave a daisy on the bench. Not as a plea, but as a promise. I'm still learning how to be here. Winter came late that year. Not with snow, but with a quiet hush. The kind that settles over everything when the world decides to breathe slower. The days grew short, and the golden hour I'd first returned in now arrived by mid-afternoon, casting long shadows across the platform like memories stretching toward dusk. I went back less often then, not because I wanted to, but because life pulled me in other directions, holidays, family obligations, the kind of seasonal loneliness that makes you question whether you're visiting out of habit or hope. But every time I passed the station on the train, I'd press my forehead to the glass and look for the kiosk. And almost always, there it was. Lights glowing softly inside, flowers bundled against the cold, and sometimes, if I was lucky, her silhouette moving gently behind the glass. Then, one December afternoon, I got off again. Not planned, just needed. The air bit at my cheeks as I stepped onto the platform. Frost lined the edges of the benches. The clock still read 5 minutes slow, its face fogged with cold. And there she was, wearing a thick wool coat the color of dried rose petals, arranging evergreen branches and red berries into small wreaths. She didn't look up right away, but when she did, her eyes softened like she'd been expecting me all along. You're early, she said. For what? I asked, stepping closer. For remembering, she replied simply. I smiled faintly and joined her at the counter. She handed me a pair of gloves. Knitted, mismatched, one thumb slightly frayed. Yours are soaked, she noted, nodding at my bare hands. I slipped them on. They smelled faintly of cedar and lavender. Probably hers. I didn't mention it. We worked side by side for a while, tying ribbons around wreaths, tucking sprigs of holly into mason jars, labeling small bundles of dried orange slices and cinnamon sticks as for tea. No rus, no agenda. Just hands moving in quiet rhythm, like we'd done this 1,000 times before. I used to think winter meant endings, I said after a while, my breath curling in the air between us. And now I think it's just rest. The earth isn't dead. It's gathering itself. She tied off a ribbon with a neat bow. That's why I love this season here. Everyone rushes through it, trying to get somewhere warmer. But the station slows down, listens, holds space for people who don't know where else to go. I thought about that, about how many lonely souls must have passed through here in December, carrying grief, joy, uncertainty, and how she'd met them all with greenery and quiet grace. Do you ever feel like you're missing out? I asked softly. On bigger things? Brighter places? She paused, looked out toward the tracks, where a train idled in the distance, steam rising like a ghost. I used to, she admitted, but then I realized, I'm not missing out. I'm tending. There's honor in that. Her words settled deep in me. Tending, not performing, not achieving, just being present, offering beauty where you are. A woman approached the kiosk then, older, wrapped in a scarf patterned with stars. She bought a small bundle of eucalyptus and mint, paid with exact change, and left without a word. But as she walked away, she touched the bundle to her chest like it was a talisman. She comes every Tuesday, my companion said quietly. Lost her husband last spring. Says the smell reminds her he's still near. I watched the woman disappear into the twilight. You give people more than flowers, don't you? I give them permission, she said, to feel, to remember, to carry something gentle into their hard days. I turned to her then. What do you carry? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached under the counter and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside were dried flower petals, ticket stubs, a smooth river stone, and a single pressed daisy, older than the ones I'd left. I carry what matters, she said, not to hold on to pain, but to honor what shaped me. I recognized that daisy. It was from the first time I came back. She'd kept it all this time. My throat tightened. You didn't have to keep that. I wanted to, she said, closing the box gently. Not because I was waiting for you, but because it marked the day I stopped pretending I didn't miss you. The honesty of it stunned me. Not dramatic, not desperate, just true. The sky darkened further. Streetlights flickered on, casting warm pools of light across the frost-dusted platform. The next train would come soon, but I didn't move. Instead, I reached into my coat pocket, where I still kept the lavender sprig from October, now dry and brittle, and placed it carefully on the counter beside her box. For your collection, I said. She picked it up, held it to her nose for a moment, then tucked it into the box with reverence. We stood in silence as the wind stirred the wreaths, making them chime softly against their hooks. Somewhere far off, a train whistle sounded, low, mournful, beautiful. I should go, I said, though every part of me wanted to stay. She nodded. Then, without a word, she took one of the small wreaths, a simple circle of pine and dried orange, and looped it over my wrist like a bracelet. So you remember, she said, that even in winter, there's something growing. I touched the wreath gently. Cold needles, sweet citrus, life persisting. Walking back to the platform, I didn't look back. But I didn't need to. I carried her quiet strength with me now, not as a burden, but as a lantern. And when I boarded the train, I left another daisy on the bench, smaller this time, almost hidden, but there, because some returns aren't about grand declarations. They're about showing up, again and again, with open hands and a heart learning how to stay. Spring arrived not with fanfare, but with a single crocus pushing through the gravel near the bench. I saw it on my way out one March afternoon. Tiny, purple, defiant. I crouched down to look at it, and when I stood, she was there, holding 2 paper cups of tea. "Chamomile again?" I asked, taking one. "With lemon this time," she said. "For clarity." We sat. The air was still cool, but the sun had weight now, warmth you could lean into. Birds had started returning, their calls stitching the silence between train announcements. The kiosk was full of tulips, hyacinths, and bunches of fresh rosemary tied with twine. Life spilling over. "I've been thinking about that couple," I said after a while. "The ones we saw arguing last summer. Do you ever wonder what happened to them?" She stirred her tea slowly. "Sometimes, but I try not to. People write their own stories. All we can do is offer them a moment of kindness while they pass through." I watched a young man approach the kiosk, buy a single white lily, and walk away clutching it like a secret. "You've built something beautiful here," I said quietly. "Not just the flowers, the space, the way people feel seen." She didn't smile right away, just looked out toward the tracks, where sunlight glinted off the rails. "I didn't build it alone," she said finally. "This place was always kind. I just stopped running long enough to notice." I thought about that, about how I'd spent years believing healing meant leaving, new cities, new names, new versions of myself. But here, in this unassuming station, she'd found peace by staying, by tending, by letting time do its slow, quiet work. "I used to think coming back meant failure," I admitted. "Like if I returned, it meant I hadn't moved on. And now I think moving on doesn't mean leaving behind. It means carrying forward what matters, and leaving room for what might still grow." She turned to me then, her eyes soft. "You've changed, haven't we both?" She nodded. "But not in the ways we expected." No, we hadn't. I wasn't the frantic, future-chasing version of myself anymore. And she wasn't the woman who once clutched timetables like lifelines, terrified of being left behind. We'd both softened, not broken, just worn smooth by time like river stones. A breeze stirred the petals in the kiosk, sending the scent of hyacinth drifting toward us. Sweet, earthy, full of promise. "I've been keeping something," I said, reaching into my bag. I pulled out a small notebook, plain, unmarked. "Not as beautiful as yours, but I started it after I came back the first time." She took it gently, opened it. Inside were sketches, not of flowers but of moments. The bench in rain, the clock tower at dusk, her hands arranging sunflowers, the daisy on my nightstand, dates scribbled in the margins, thoughts tucked between lines. "I didn't know you could draw," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't either," I said, "until I had something worth remembering." She closed the notebook and held it against her chest for a long moment. Then she handed it back, her fingers brushing mine. "Thank you," she said, "for seeing me." I swallowed. "Thank you for staying." We didn't say more, didn't need to. The trains came and went. People passed. The crocus by the bench trembled in the breeze. And we sat, 2 souls who'd once run in opposite directions, now resting in the same quiet space. Not fixed, not finished, but finally at peace with the journey. When I stood to leave, she didn't offer a flower this time. Instead, she reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small seed packet. "Wildflowers, labeled for places that need color. Plant them wherever you land," she said. I tucked it into my coat, right next to my heart. Walking to the platform, I glanced back once. She was already turning back to her kiosk, humming softly, sunlight catching the silver in her hair. And on the bench where we'd sat, a single daisy rested fresh, white, waiting. Not for me, not exactly, but for whoever needed it. And maybe that was the real gift. Not just being welcomed back, but learning how to welcome others, even your past self, into the gentle rhythm of now. The first real warmth of May settled over the station like a sigh. Not the sharp heat of summer, but something softer, like the world had finally unclenched its shoulders. I came back on a Tuesday this time, mid-morning, when the platform was nearly empty and the light fell in long, quiet slants across the wood. She was watering the flower boxes behind the kiosk, her sleeves rolled up, forearms dusted with soil. She didn't turn when I approached, but she said, "You're late." I smiled. "By how much?" 3 days. She set the watering can down and wiped her hands on her apron. "The lilacs bloomed Sunday. I saved you a sprig." She reached into a small vase on the counter and handed me a cluster of pale purple blooms. Their scent was sweet, almost nostalgic, like childhood evenings and open windows. "I've been thinking about what you said," I told her, leaning against the counter, "about tending instead of running. And I think I'm starting to understand it." I paused. "I planted those wildflower seeds in my window box. They're just green shoots now, but they're trying." She looked at me then, really looked. "That's all any of us can do." We sat on the bench, the same one, always the same one, and watched a freight train rumble past in the distance, its cars clattering like old bones settling. The air smelled of warm wood, damp earth, and the faint tang of diesel. Normal, ordinary, and somehow deeply comforting. "I used to hate ordinary," I said quietly. "Thought it meant settling. But now, I think ordinary is where life actually happens. Not in the grand gestures, but in the small returns." She nodded, like coming back to a bench, or leaving a daisy, or remembering someone's favorite flower. "Ich glänzte her." "You remembered mine? You always liked daisies," she said simply, "even when you pretended to prefer roses." I laughed, a soft, surprised sound. "I did that to seem more romantic." "You were always romantic," she said, "just in quieter ways." The truth of that settled between us. I hadn't needed grand declarations. I'd needed presence, consistency, someone who noticed how I tucked my hair, or that I took my tea with too much honey, or that I always sat on the left side of the bench because the right slat creaked. And she'd noticed. All of it. A young girl wandered over then, no older than 6, holding her mother's hand and staring wide-eyed at the kiosk. "Can I have a flower?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. My companion knelt down to her level. "Of course. Which one speaks to you?" The girl pointed to a single sunflower, its face turned toward the light. "That one. It looks happy." "It does," she agreed, gently plucking it and handing it over. "Hold it by the stem, not the head. Let it keep looking up." The girl beamed, clutching the flower like treasure, and skipped back to her mother. As they walked away, the mother mouthed thank you over her shoulder. "She'll remember this," I said. "Maybe," she replied, "or maybe she'll just carry the feeling, the kindness, the lightness. That's enough." I thought about all the people who'd passed through this station over the years. How many had left heavier than they arrived? And how many, thanks to her quiet generosity, had left carrying something gentle instead? "I don't know if I ever thanked you," I said suddenly. "For what?" "For staying. For not turning this place into a monument to what we lost. For making it a home for everyone else." She looked out toward the tracks, where sunlight shimmered on the rails. "I didn't do it for you," she said gently. "I did it for me, because I needed to believe that beauty could grow even in places where hearts had broken." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small envelope. Inside, a pressed wildflower from my window box, its petals still faintly purple. I placed it on the bench between us. "For your collection," I said. She picked it up, studied it, then tucked it into the same wooden box she'd shown me in winter. "It's growing," she said softly. "The flower." "No," she said, meeting my eyes. "You." I didn't argue. Maybe she was right. Maybe healing wasn't about erasing the past, but about letting it compost into something that could feed the future. The next train announcement came, soft, distant. My ride. But I didn't stand right away. Instead, I reached for her hand, not to hold it, just to touch it, briefly, like you might touch a tree you've known your whole life, just to feel its bark, its steadiness. She didn't pull away, just let my fingers rest against hers for a breath, 2, 3. Then I stood, walked to the platform, didn't look back. But I knew, without seeing, that when I left, there'd be a daisy on the bench. And maybe, just maybe, I'd leave one too. Not as a question, but as an answer. Asterisk, I'm still here, still learning, still tending. Asterisk, the summer heat arrived gently that year. No sudden blaze, just a slow thickening of the air, like honey poured over the hours. I came back on the longest day, when twilight stretched so far it blurred the line between evening and memory. She was sitting on the bench when I arrived, not behind the kiosk, not arranging flowers, just waiting. Or maybe not waiting at all, just being. Her hands rested in her lap, empty for once. No scissors, no sense, no notebook, just stillness. I sat beside her without a word. We watched the sun dip low, painting the platform in gold, then amber, then a soft rose that made everything look tender. The clock still read 5 minutes slow. The tracks shimmered with heat. Somewhere, a train sighed in the distance, but it wasn't ours. I've been thinking about time, she said after a long while. Which part? The way it doesn't heal anything by itself. It just makes space. And what we do with that space, that's what matters. I nodded. I used to think if I waited long enough, the hurt would fade. But it didn't. It just changed shape. Into what? She asked softly. Into something I could carry without breaking. She turned to me then, her eyes catching the last light. And now I don't want to carry it alone. She didn't answer right away, just looked out toward the horizon, where the sky met the rails in a seam of quiet promise. A breeze stirred the hem of her dress, lifted a few loose petals from the kiosk floor, sent them spinning like tiny dancers. You know, she said, I never thought you'd come back. Not really. Hoped, maybe, but I didn't expect it. I didn't either, I admitted. I thought I had to be someone else first. Someone worthy of returning. She shook her head. You were always worthy. You just didn't know how to stay. That hit me deep, not as an accusation, but as a truth spoken with kindness. I hadn't known how to stay. Not with her. Not with myself. I'd run because staying felt like surrender. But now I saw, staying was the bravest thing of all. A moth fluttered past, drawn to the warm glow of the station lamp flickering to life above us. She reached into her pocket and handed me a small envelope, thinner than the others. Inside was a single sentence, written in her neat script. Asterisk, you don't have to earn your way back. You already belong here. Asterisk, I traced the words with my thumb. No flerish, no demand, just grace. I keep leaving daisies, I said quietly. Even when I'm not sure you'll see them. I always see them, she said, and I always leave one back. Not because I'm waiting for you, but because I believe you might return. And if you do, I want you to know you're remembered. Tears pricked my eyes, but they didn't fall. They just sat there, warm and quiet like everything else in this place. The next train announcement came, my train, but neither of us moved. Instead, she reached for my hand again. Not briefly this time. She laced her fingers through mine, her palm warm and steady against mine. We didn't speak, didn't need to. The silence between us wasn't empty. It was full of everything we'd lived, lost, and somehow found again. When the train pulled in, its lights cutting through the dusk, I finally stood. She didn't let go right away, just held on for one more breath. Then two. I'll be here, she said, releasing my hand. Not because you're waiting, I said. No, she agreed, because this is where I choose to be. I walked to the platform, heart full but calm, and just before I stepped onto the train, I turned. She was already walking back to the kiosk, her silhouette outlined in golden light. But on the bench where our hands had rested, where our silence had lived, a single daisy lay, fresh and white, facing the tracks. I didn't take it. I left it there, because some things aren't meant to be carried away. They're meant to stay, anchors in the quiet rhythm of a place that taught us how to come home, not to who we were, but to who we are, together in the gentle unfolding of now. Autumn returned, but softer this time, like the world had learned how to let go without breaking. I came back on a Thursday, just after rain, when the platform gleamed like wet glass and the air smelled of damp earth and late-blooming jasmine. She was there, sweeping water off the kiosk steps with an old broom, her hair tucked under a scarf the color of burnt sienna. She saw me and paused, leaning on the broom like it was a walking stick she'd known for years. "You're on time," she said. "For once," I replied. We sat on the bench, the wood still cool from the rain but not cold. The kind of cool that wakes you up gently, like a hand on your shoulder in the morning. Above us, the clock ticked, still 5 minutes behind, as if it refused to believe time should ever hurry anyone along. "I've been thinking about goodbyes," I said after a while. She tilted her head. "Which kind?" "The ones we never said." I looked at her. That day, 10 years ago, I left without one, and I carried that silence like a stone. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Maybe we didn't need a goodbye then. Maybe we just needed a pause." "A pause?" "Yes." She turned to face me fully now. "Because what we had wasn't over. It was just waiting for us to grow into it." I hadn't thought of it that way. I'd always seen our parting as an ending, a failure of timing, of courage, of love. But what if it wasn't? What if it was just a breath held too long, finally released? I used to think coming back meant reopening a wound, I admitted. But it didn't. It meant stitching it closed with better thread. She smiled faintly. "Time doesn't heal. Presence does." And there it was, the truth I'd been circling for months. Healing wasn't about distance. It was about showing up, again and again, with honesty and tenderness, even when it scared you. A train passed on the far track, its windows glowing amber in the dusk. Inside, people leaned against glass, reading, sleeping, staring out at the world rushing by. I wondered how many of them were carrying unsaid goodbyes of their own. "I don't want to leave things unsaid anymore," I told her. "You don't have to," she said. "Not everything needs words. Some things are spoken in daisies, in shared silence, in showing up." I reached into my coat and pulled out a small bundle, dried wildflowers from my window box, tied with twine. "For your collection," I said. She took it, held it to her chest. "They grew well. They did." We sat in silence as the sky deepened from rose to violet. Streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows that merged at our feet. The station felt like a sanctuary, not because it was grand, but because it was honest. A place where time slowed enough for hearts to catch up. "I'm not leaving again," I said quietly. She didn't look surprised. "I know. Not like before. Not running. Not hiding. I know," she repeated. "I'll still take the train, still live my life. But I won't disappear." She nodded. "You don't have to promise forever. Just be here when you're here." That was all. No demands. No expectations. Just presence, offered and received like a gift, not a contract. The next train arrived. My train. But this time, when I stood, I didn't walk straight to the platform. Instead, I knelt beside the bench and tucked a single daisy into the crack between the slats, right where our initials were carved, hidden all those years ago. Not on top, not for show, but nestled deep where only someone who knew to look would find it. She watched me, eyes soft. "That's not for you," I said. "It's for us. For the version of us that finally learned how to stay." She didn't say anything, just placed her hand over mine for a moment, warm, steady, sure. Then I walked to the train. This time, I didn't wait for the station to fade behind me. I kept it in my chest. The scent of jasmine, the weight of her hand, the quiet certainty that some returns aren't about fixing the past. They're about honoring it and building something new together on ground that's finally stopped shaking. The first frost of late November came quietly, just a silver dusting on the benches, gone by mid-morning. I didn't come back because I needed to. I came back because I wanted to. because this place had stopped being a memory and started being a home. She was arranging bare branches in tall vases. Birch, willow, something twisted and elegant I didn't know the name of. Winter greenery, she called it. For people who miss color but understand rest, she'd said once. She looked up when I stepped onto the platform. Didn't smile right away. Just watched me walk toward her like she was memorizing the way my coat caught the light, the way my boots tapped softly on the damp stone. "You're early," she said. "For once," I replied. I wanted to see the light hit the bench before it turned gold. She nodded, understanding without needing explanation. Some things don't require words. They just settle between two people like breath. We sat, not on the bench this time, but on the low wall beside the kiosk where we could watch the whole platform stretch out before us. The clock still read 5 minutes slow. A train idled at the far end, its engine humming like a lullaby. The air smelled of wood smoke from somewhere beyond the station and the faint, clean scent of dried eucalyptus hanging from her rafters. "I've been thinking about stories," I said after a while. "Which ones?" "The ones we tell ourselves about who we are, about what we deserve." I looked at her. I used to think mine was a story of leaving, of almost love and missed chances. But it's not. "What is it?" she asked softly. "It's a story of returning. Not once, but again and again, until I finally believed I belonged." She reached into her pocket and handed me a small envelope. No writing, just my name in her familiar script. Inside was a single pressed daisy, older than the others, its edges browned with time, and beneath it, a note. Asterisk, "You were always welcome. You just forgot how to knock." Asterisk, I traced the petals with my thumb. This was the one she'd kept from that very first day, the day I stepped off the train with no plan and a heart full of ghosts. She'd carried it all this time, not as a relic but as a reminder that showing up matters, that presence is a kind of love. "I don't leave daisies on the bench anymore," I told her. "No. I plant them now, in my window box, along the path to my door, where they can grow." She smiled then, slow, deep, like sunlight breaking through clouds. "Good." We didn't talk about the future, didn't make plans, didn't promise daily visits or grand gestures. We just sat, two people who'd learned that love doesn't always need to be loud to be real. Sometimes it's quiet, a shared thermos of tea, a sprig of rosemary tucked into a coat, a bench worn smooth by years of waiting that finally turned into staying. When it was time to go, I didn't say goodbye. Instead, I stood, brushed frost from my sleeves, and walked to the kiosk. From the small basket labeled "Take What You Need," I took a single stem of dried lavender. Its purple faded to gray, but its scent still there if you leaned in close. Then I placed a fresh daisy in its place. Not as a payment, not as a plea, just as an offering from one tender heart to another. As I boarded the train, I didn't look back. But I didn't need to. I carried the station with me now. Not as a wound, not as a dream, but as a truth. That some places don't let you go because they never truly lost you. They just waited, patiently, for you to remember your own name. And sometimes, on quiet nights when the rain taps gently against the window, I still hear the soft tick of that slow clock, the rustle of petals in glass jars, and the sound of someone humming a tune I almost remember. It doesn't hurt anymore. It holds me, and in the space between one breath and the next, I know I'm exactly where I'm meant to be.